Didnt begant. The hunt is on. JagdKommandos or hunting commandos were actually Russian in origin, as the Tsar had formed some special hunting battalions in 1886. The Russian field manual included instructions for creating hunting battalions of up to 4 men per infantry company, artillery company, or cavalry squad. These men were brave, resolute, and self-reliant, as they may go months without supplies. Their name came from the hunting programs they had in basic training. They were made to help destroy ambushes, as well as the weapons of the late 19th century were more accurate and more deadly, with more firepower, making ambushes costly. The JagdKommandos were made in the same vein to combat ambushes of guerrilla warfare in Dalmatia, Bosnia-Herzegovina, and even some parts of Albania. It was also made for scouting and patrols as well. JagdKommandos were primarily, however, to combat the Russians, which were a likely enemy after Austria Hugnry declined to help Russia in the Crimean War. There was no place, no training, and even no place within the army doctrine of the time to have them at the front. They were just the hunting and scouting troops. The army doctrine did not advance with the times, as it relied on the 1816s doctrine and emphasis on the army and the infantry, with no coordination with the cavalry or the artillery. Training was sharpshooting and marksmanship and personal fitness for the JagdKommandos. The infantry was supposed to win on the field with vicious attacks and with courage, and with willpower alone, to combat artillery and shells. They were to overcome artillery, machine gun fire, and even lances at the stomach. Many nations like Austria Hugnry and France adopted this idea in the very early months of the war. This is why you see the slaughter of 1914. JagdKommandos were still in the back, just scouting and hunting in the early stages of the war, especially on the Eastern Front, where the plains were vast and obviously had plenty of food. With the introduction of trenches, especially on some parts of the Russian front, and trench warfare kicking in, there was little news for scouting now. With the battle in the Alps as well, there was no need for scouting, period. No cavalry at all, even. The JagdKommandos were now trained mostly to be able to survive on foot across no man's land, and to destroy barbed wire and attack with explosives like dynamite and grenades. There was still to be news as scouts and not shock troops or assault troops. Soon the 5th Army on the Spetsnazovich Bonvonia with new sappers and pioneer units to destroy enemy trenches, and soon Austrian High Command were impressed. Soon they had made the same training grounds that Bonvonia had to train his troops in the trench assault, and then trained the JagdKommandos in trench assaults. They were the groundwork of the Austro-Hungarian shock troops. In 1916, they were sent to learn the German Sturmtruppe or storm troop tactics and trench raiding. The offensive doctrine was back, but it was difficult to start this organization at a company level, especially after the Brusilov offensive, which crippled the Austro-Hungarian Empire and broke their backs for the remainder of the war. There was a shortage of machine guns and steel helmets as well. The winter results were terrible, but by May 1917, Austria-Hungary had a battalion in training and 700 plus men in close combat training. During the 10th Battle of the Isonzo River, they broke through the Italian lines. They provided local counterattacks and took trenches in great success. All objectives were taken with minimal losses. This made more training camps for JagdKommandos spring up, and made the JagdKommandos an elite force of Austria-Hungary. They would be equipped with more trench-breaking weapons like flamethrowers and more grenades. With the Austrians' line equipment, they mostly had to strip away from the frontline soldiers for the Jags. This was remedied with the capture of vast Italian lands in the 11th Battle of the Isonzo River, or the Battle of Caporetto. In many ways, this was the last major victory for the JagdKommandos and Austria-Hungary itself. Then they were refitted for the 1918 summer offensive to aid the Kaiserslautern on the Western Front. On the 15th of July, they attacked and made the Second Battle of the Piave River, but failed to break through. Number 1, the Italians learned from their mistakes. Number 2, they appointed General Diaz as Commander-in-Chief of the Italian Armed Forces. And number 3, they started to use and apply defense-in-depth tactics, like the Central Powers, and they beat back the JagdKommandos. They captured the first trench but then was bogged down. They had captured the first trench but then was bogged down after the other trenches. They took heavy casualties as the Italian fortified strong points were used instead of minor defences. This failure was a blow to the JagdKommandos, and obviously the downfall of Austria-Hungary as well. And they did not recover and kind of disappeared from the public mind. The concept did live on in the Austrian military tradition and tactics, bringing them back for World War II and reinstated them in 1962 as a special elite force in the Republic of Austria. Despite all the victories and despite all the shortcomings, they were trained like other nations. They were the shock troops with infiltration. They were the first official shock troops of World War I, the JagdKommandos. Thanks for watching, hope you learned something, and that's it. Hope you enjoyed. Nothing really tactical about the gameplay, so just enjoy. Hope you learned something.